Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Just a quick note to let you know that my new book, Style, The Art of Creating a Beautiful Home, is now available around the world. If you'd like to get a taste of what's inside, go to nataliewalton.com/style book and you will receive the introduction for free. You can also listen to episode 59 where I read an excerpt from one of my favorite chapters in the book. Order a signed copy at Imprint House or buy a copy from your favorite bookseller. Hello everyone, I'm very excited to share today's interview because, as you may have noticed, the world of interiors has gone crazy for natural plaster finishes on the walls, and I get asked all the time about the finish that has been used in the studio, the still studio. And I thought, who better to answer all your questions than a bona fide expert, Karmin, who has the business Mineral Fox. She is a supplier of natural mineral plasters and renders and is really passionate about the power of natural wall finishes from lime, clay, and gypsum to enhance health and well-being inside the home. She really breaks down the difference between different finishes such as Tadelakt, Marmerino, and what is lime plaster to really get you to understand the differences in the looks and what you should look out for as well, what to avoid. It is such an educational episode and I hope that you get as much value out of it as I did. Hello, Karmin. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Imprint podcast. I am really looking forward to our conversation because I get so many questions asked about the Tadelakt I've used in my studio, and I obviously went on a huge learning curve in relation to that, but there's still so much that I'm really keen to learn about all the different finishes when it comes to plaster. But before we get into that and you sharing your knowledge about what you've learnt, can you just give us a little insight into your journey to this point? What's your background? What did you start before you even got into doing this business?
Sure. It's always interesting, isn't it? Well, just to give your listeners a bit of a quick overview, I am the founder of Mineral Fox, run the business with my husband, Rob, and we have a team here in Noosa, in Queensland, and we offer primarily natural mineral plasters and renders that are made here in Australia alongside the best boutique finishes from around the world. So we have beautiful clay plaster from Clayworks in the UK alongside micro cement from Macadia Decoration in France. And our catalogue is continually growing. So that's what we do. We work with applicators across the country. And we also support our clients to DIY small projects with our materials as well. So a bit of a strange story. I actually spent 15 years in IT, working for Fortune 500 tech companies around the world in channel development, actually. So it's funny how things come around, isn't it? The skills that seem totally like, what would I ever do with this, comes around now when we're working with applicators and channel partners to distribute our materials. I grew up in a small town in a caravan and quit school at grade 10, went on the dole, came back the next year, realised that wasn't much fun, worked really hard, moved to Brisbane and then Melbourne, and then multiple countries after that. So that's my story.
I would like to know, what is channel development? Because you say it sort of relates in some way to this. What is channel development?
Yeah, for companies that sell business to business and they want to achieve scale, selling through other businesses is a way to do that. So in tech, for example, you would have integrators and resellers that would resell the hardware to end customers. So it's a way to scale. So if you liken that to plaster and render, for example, you need to get materials to different places. It gets expensive when you start shipping, and people need to be able to see and touch the materials. So having applicator partners, having distribution is just as important to achieve scale, especially in a country like this.
So then you said, you grew up in Brisbane and now you live in Noosa. And for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with the geography of Australia, that's about, how many hours is it north of Brisbane?
It's very fast. It's about an hour and a half. But I'm sorry, I didn't mention, I actually grew up in Gympie, a very small town. And I grew up in Caravan. So very different. Very different to Noosa, that's for sure. But that's about an hour away.
Yeah. And so how did you end up then? You said you sort of worked in the world of tech. How on earth did you end up with a business that's all about the home, plaster finishes, creating a healthy environment, creating a beautiful interior? I'm also curious about your journey with homes as well, but how did you end up with this business?
Well, I was always a little bit strange when I look back over the years. I was someone that, I lived in a lot of different countries and traveled a lot, but I always noticed finishes. So when I would go to Morocco or when I go to Greece, I would take photos, I would check bags on building sites, I would ask people. And actually, on the third date with my husband in London, I proclaimed that I wanted a Moroccan bathroom one day. So it was a little bit strange. And when we moved to Australia many years later, I had all these grand dreams of what I wanted in my home. And then I quickly realized that those materials didn't exist here in Australia. And largely due to young country, the way that we build our buildings, it's primarily been a cement render kind of a place, exterior cement and acrylic renders. And going through that process of trying to find those kinds of materials, trying to find the people that could apply them and work with them. And just, I think, as you were touching on before, that lack of transparency and ease to access information around these kind of products, that kind of took me on a journey of learning, but also I experienced failures where professionals were installing materials that weren't suited for our types of buildings in the areas that we wanted to use them. And then I experienced just a lack of information and help when we tried to fix things with other materials. That also went bad. So I ended up empowering myself essentially with training and started to apply myself. And I just want to put it out there, I'm not a professional applicator. Nothing can compete with 20 years of experience. It's not child's play. But I was able to fix our bathroom, and I started doing my own work and started researching materials, importing materials, testing materials, and it just kind of evolved. But it got to the point where women especially were coming to me with questions. How do I fix my failed bathroom, or what material should I use here, and where can I go for this, and who do you recommend? And I knew that there was something there that was unique to me and that was a real pull. It's just because nothing like Mineral Fox has existed before, I didn't know what form that would take, what the business would actually look like. So I started it in a DIY kind of context where I was helping primarily women with online courses, information, and selling material for their own small DIY projects. And then it quickly escalated beyond that to be what it is today, much bigger.
And how long ago was that approximately that you sort of started to go on this journey?
Well, the journey has been a long one, I would say, at least 10 years of learning and doing, researching, traveling, all of that with a focus on finishes. But the actual, from when we started making an offering has been less than 2 years.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Well, it's interesting you say your experience of having other people come to you, that you've had a few bad experiences with products and probably trades as well, I imagine. And that's kind of how I came across you, is we know someone mutually that had a bad experience, and excuse me, and she was telling me about you, and I looked you up and I thought, wow, I wish I knew that you existed prior to kind of me working on my studio, because it really is hard to get information in general, whether you're talking about your specific trade or websites or whatever. It just seems like there's so many words and terms that seem a little bit foreign, and let's be honest, I mean, trades are very skilled at what they do, but sometimes their skill is not communication, in terms of sort of sharing knowledge, or, and that's for any type of trade, whether it's a plumber, whether it's an electrician, they know what they know, they get in there, they do the job, and you kind of go, oh, okay, it's done. You have to really educate yourself on the process, and it can feel quite overwhelming at that beginning stage when you actually don't have a lot of knowledge about a particular thing. And then all of a sudden, you're getting asked questions about, well, do you want to do this thing or that thing? And yeah, it can be really tricky. So like I said, I'm so excited to sort of learn from you about the things that you have learned. I guess I just want to touch a little bit though. So have you been a handy person in the past? Like, are you one of those people who's always sort of DIY'd your own home or renovated your own home? And is your home important to you? Have you done a lot of renovations? Like, what's your story, your home journey, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So for me, home is a very important place. It's a place that not only I want to feel safe in, but for me personally, I want to feel inspired in. And for my family, I want to feel healthy in. I don't want to be worried about things that can harm my children. Our home is completely, it's probably hard to see behind me, but coated in plasters and a floor, a bathroom, everything. And I'm not a DIY kind of person generally, but I love plaster, and plaster, I think, as people get more familiar with it, you'll see it's very cathartic, therapeutic kind of material, a little like ceramics and clay plaster. You can roll it in your hand. Smells beautiful, looks beautiful. It's very sensory. And I enjoy that, and I think a lot of women do. Women that have tried our materials, they love it, and it's not only a sense of achievement, but like I say, you can't just pick up a trowel and be like a master. I mean, there are people that we work with that are truly masters of what they do, especially with natural finishes. But what you can achieve with some materials is still a very beautiful, healthy, organic-looking finish. And that's what I enjoy. I am totally in love with all the materials, and I love nothing more than creating and experimenting and colours and new textures and things. But in my home, I will do a granny flat or a wall or a bathroom because I love the process. It feels nice, and it's a joyful experience. And when you've done it, you feel great. When you look back and go, yeah, I did that, and it looks beautiful.
So can you break it down for us then? Can you kind of give us like the dummies version of wall finishes, the different types of option, and what differentiates them? Can you sort of go through some of the different ones, the key ones, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, plaster and render. A lot of people, because this is a new kind of thing here, I suppose. Render is normally when we're talking about outside coatings, outside finishes, like outside you'll have cement render and acrylic renders. That's pretty normal. And then plaster is usually internal. Now, we're talking today about decorative plasters. You've also got plasterboard setting plasters that you get at Bunnings. So I've had people ask me before, oh, my husband says I can just get some plaster from Bunnings. That's a different kind of plaster. It's a gluey material used to set plasterboard. And then you've got micro cement. And micro cement is, it's kind of an in-between. It's not a natural material, and there are as many different micro cements as there are paints. Cheap ones and premium ones. The one I've imported and tested at least 6 different micro cements from different countries, and there are very, very big differences between them. In terms of plaster, that's probably where you're getting there's a lot of different types. In Australia, and generally speaking, I would say across Europe and the US, you typically have been seeing a lot of what people call Venetian plaster. Venetian plaster is traditionally from Venice. It's lime with marble. It's designed so that you can polish it. So it's usually in this country interchangeable with the term polished plaster. And you can definitely get natural Venetian plaster, of course. It's a very old material. But a lot of Venetian plaster is ready mix. So it's pre-mixed in a bucket with acrylic to make it easier to go on and easier for people to use. So it's, as I always tell people, just because something has lime in it or something has clay in it, doesn't mean it's a natural material. It's always important to know what you're getting. So that's Venetian. Marmorino is also something that you hear a lot, and that's essentially the same thing but not polished the way that Venetian plaster is. And, I started Mineral Fox out of frustration because there was pretty much Venetian plaster, concrete effect looking plasters, fake stone looking plasters. And, I wanted something very minimal and timeless and matte. And that's where, for me, Venetian, a lot of people really like that. But for me, it was just very busy. And in my home and in my environment, I'm looking for a more pared down, natural, subtle look. And that's kind of why I started to discover lime and clay and what have you. So in your group of lime plaster, you have Venetian, you have Marmorino, you probably Tadelakt. Tadelakt is traditionally a Moroccan lime plaster. It's as much referring to the unique material as it is the process. And in this country, there are a lot of different versions of Tadelakt. So there's been recreations of Tadelakt and ready-mix Tadelakt, but the traditional Tadelakts, there is, that I'm aware of, one person, there might be more, that import original Tadelakt from Morocco. And it's applied in a very specific, time-intensive way, very thick, and it's then compressed and polished with the stone. There's black olive soap applied that has a carbonization with the lime to make it waterproof or water resistant. And Tadelakt is a very beautiful material that has its own look. You can't replicate real Tadelakt. It's a very supple, slightly undulated, smooth finish, but it has to be done properly. And when you're working in wet areas with modern building materials like cement sheeting, it needs to be done exactly right. Otherwise, that's when, problems can occur. And there's been a lot of that, sadly. It happened to me as well.
Can I just, can I just interrupt on that? Because quite curious because I've sort of read, and from my understanding is that people say that you can use Tadelakt in the bathroom and that it's actually very good in a bathroom. And I remember even sort of doing my kind of research and looking online and saying, well, that's actually how they use it in Morocco. So you're saying that because we have a different process to building the buildings, and that's where I guess the compromise comes in, the material maybe becomes compromised and you can have issues with perhaps water damage. Is that what you think's happening? Or am I misunderstanding?
No. There are a few things that are at play. One is there are different types of Tadelakt on the market. So there is original Tadelakt that comes from a specific place in Morocco, and it has its specific application system. But then you've also got companies that make their own Tadelakt. So it's a lime plaster that has characteristics of and aesthetics of Tadelakt, but it's not the exact same plaster. It's not the same system. So if you were to have real Tadelakt from Morocco and follow the exact application system, it would be a very, very time-intensive process. It's put on thick, it's compressed, the water has to come out of it, it's polished, it's soaked. And that's one thing. There are some Tadelakts that are just put on thin and then they rely on a sealer. So whether that be a polyurethane sealer or a wax sealer, but that's the difference with the material. Then when it comes to the building situation that we're talking about, in Morocco, you're typically building on a natural material like a stone or something like that. And you put on the material, natural material on natural material. It has a natural cohesion and it also works together. When you're putting a natural material like a lime plaster on a cement sheet, it relies on something else to hold it on there. And it's also not breathing and cohering the way that it was designed to do. So sometimes what can happen is that the water can get into that plaster between the plaster and the waterproofing membrane that we've applied on sheeting, which is a acrylic material, not natural. It starts to come away, it starts to crack, it starts to get mold spores, it starts to discolor. And that's kind of, I think, something that is really good to remember. If you want a natural material to be functional, when it comes to water or weather, things like that, it's important to consider the whole building. It's important to not just consider the coating, but to consider what the coating's going on and how they perform together. So we say that we have natural lime renders for outside. These are a breathable lime-based render, an alternative to acrylic renders. But we don't like putting them on sheeting because they don't hold on and they don't, sheeting, you usually see rubbery acrylic renders on those. It holds on, it moves, and whereas with natural plasters and renders, if you want them to be functional with weather and wet, it's good to have natural substrates as well.
So would you?
I hope that's
sorry.
helpful.
No, it's actually answering a lot of questions that I have in my mind. But would you recommend then, if somebody did want to use something such as Tadelakt in their own home, that they should then be applying it to, when you say natural surface, is that like brick or, if they're sort of building a studio or, there's a particular area in their home that they want to put it on, what would you recommend to them then?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, first of all, know why you want Tadelakt, because I'll come to some more plasters. They're all lime plasters, but they each have different aesthetics and different functions. And so I think it's important, part of what we're trying to do is to educate people and allow them to advocate for what they really want, not what they think they want. So, like Venetian Tadelakt, a lot of people think they want Tadelakt, but they don't understand why. They just want a look. That not always, but sometimes, you know, they might see it in a magazine or something. So with Tadelakt and natural materials that need to function like that, then whoever's applying them should be able to guide you. But yes, I would say that it's better to have block or brick as the substrate and not sheeting. But, you know, I would recommend people also talk to their applicator. I would also recommend people understand and ask what the product is. You know, what brand are you using? What is it? What's the system? Start asking questions so that you can empower yourself with what's actually being used, because sometimes we think we're getting a Tadelakt and we might be getting something else. Also, asking about sealers and is also really important as well. But sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now.
No, it's good. So it's, yeah, I just thought it was interesting to know, because I get asked a lot of questions and so you're talking about, so you've spoken about Venetian plaster, which is like it's more of a shiny finish, isn't it? It's quite a busy look in terms of the space. And then we've spoken about Marmerino and Tadelakt. What would you say is the difference between Marmerino and Tadelakt in terms of how they look?
Well, Tadelakt is usually used in wet areas. That's the first thing. Like, I don't see too much Tadelakt outside wet areas, apart from your beautiful studio. Usually it's kept for that area, and a lot of that has to do with price as well. If you wanted to just compare them on an aesthetic basis, Tadelakt has a traditional original Tadelakt has an unmistakable undulation, smoothness, and suppleness. It's difficult to describe. I think you have to see it. You know, if you think of Moroccan bathrooms and those beautiful round edges and that subtle sheen, it's very fine plaster and very. That's why you use Tadelakt usually, if you want to use it in wet areas, or you want that really beautiful molded look in basins, and you can't get that. You can try, you can put other materials over a cement base or something, but nothing looks exactly like the original thing. The Marmerino is typically a more pared back version of the Venetian. So Venetian's polished to a high shine. It's got lots of veining in it, lots of motion. Marmerino is a bit more subtle, so you get, it's still an Italian look, but it's not as full on as the polished Venetian. So it's kind of an in-between. It's not that, like the other plasters that we offer are more your matte, very matte, slightly nuanced, timeless feel. So when you look at like Kim Kardashian's house, that's kind of being passed around a bit now, and that's lime plaster, and it's more like a natural. It's an Italian lime, but it's not polished the way that Venetian is, and it's not finished the way that Marmerino is. So it's a much more pared back lime plaster. So you can have different kinds of lime plasters outside of your Marmerinos and Venetians and Tadelakts, like we offer, that just have different kinds of what we call aggregates. So you can have marble, you can have sand, you can have different grain sizes, you can have different binders, and it just affects the look of the plaster itself.
Okay, and so I'm dying to know, so what have you used in your own home?
Well, sadly, not sadly, our home was done by a lovely guy, a very, very good applicator from Byron, actually, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And this is what's called, in Australia, they call it a Spanish plaster. It's a gypsum plaster. And it's got a polyurethane sealer over it. What we do that's different, and that is around the outside of our home and in our granny flat and at our beach house, we use our Ibiza gypsum and lime plaster, which is a plaster made very local and Australian ingredients. We leave it unsealed so that it's breathable and you get all the health benefits from it. And it's put on very thick, so it has that kind of thick undulation, I suppose. And I've done a custom tint on it, so we've got a lovely eucalyptus colour, and it's lots of different finishes around the place. But sadly, in our own home, we've still got the finishes from the days where I was trialing things and didn't know, what was out there, I suppose.
So just to clarify, and I'm hoping I'm asking on everyone's behalf, not just my own.
Yes.
So gypsum plaster, is that different to lime plaster, or can you explain?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll just go through the materials we offer and what's different about them. That might be the simplest thing, right? So for our internal products, we have a micro cement, which is from France, one of the most premium micro cements in the world. Micro cement, it's original form because there's all different kinds, but true micro cement is cement with resin. So the cement is hard, the resin is flexible and highly water resistant. So that's applied in wet areas, floors, basins, countertops, and a wide range of colours. It looks natural, but it's very, very strong. So it's not going to chip the way that plaster would chip. And it's also water resistant in itself. So it's not just relying on a sealer over the top of it. So that's a big part of our business. It's a really game-changing material. And then we have plasters. So we have our gypsum and lime plaster is a very unusual plaster. No one else offers it in Australia. It's based on old Mediterranean recipes. The gypsum and lime, they're a bit of a strange combination. They kind of work against each other, but with each other. I won't go into all the detail, but it's a material that gives that Mediterranean look. You can put it on very thick so that the health benefits that I'll talk about soon, I'd love to share, are more pronounced, because the thicker you put something on, the more it's going to be working for you. And it's a great entry-level plaster to have all through your house, very matte and very natural looking. So it doesn't look like a Venetian, it doesn't look like a Marmorino. It has no acrylics or VOCs in it. Then we have a clay plaster full catalogue from Clayworks in the UK. They're an incredible company, really leading the way with clay plaster finishes in the world. Clay is probably one of the most sustainable finishes available. Different natural materials have different, I guess you could evaluate them differently. Like cement is, we'll keep that out of this conversation, but fired at a very high temperature, cement accounts for, last time I checked, at least 5% of the world's CO2 emissions. So when you start talking about natural plasters, that's why we talk about lime and clay. Lime is fired at a lower heat. So while it's not as strong as cement, it's better for the environment. And then clay is a raw material, so it's not fired at all. So, but it gives a very beautiful, subtle look that lime plasters can't replicate. So it's it's got a very unique aesthetic and very, very good for your health as well. And then we have various lime plasters that give, again, a timeless matte look. Different finishes are available, but none of our plasters have acrylics in them. They're not ready mix. They come in paper sacks and you mix them with water, and they just have that real pared back, nuanced look that is kind of like the opposite of your shiny, polished, busy plasters. And
one of the things that I realised when I started going down this journey myself of getting the Tadelakt in this studio, And I'll just preface that, well, I saw Tadelakt in the home of someone who I shot from one of my books, Still, The Slow Home. And she had it in her kitchen and some other spaces, and I really loved it. And then we were sort of looking to put it in here, and then it was sort of like, well, if we do that little bit, and it's actually not a very big studio at all. So it just, even though I knew at the time it was a more expensive finish, I just thought, we'll just do it. It's not a big area. But one of the things that I sort of learned, or it kind of put the fear of God in me a little bit, was the fact that obviously when this type of finish is being applied to a wall, I mean, I used to work like 20 plus years ago in a paint store. Like I'm from the world of paint, and I know that paint, that's like almost a whole other conversation about the toxicity levels in some of them, and and the environmental impact. But paint is so easy to use in terms of if you have a light fitting and you decide you're going to change where that light fitting is, and you can quickly just repaint over it, or you can touch it up with plaster or whatever. What would you say, to sort of be, I guess it's, again, to educate people, if you are using a plaster finish, can you make changes to your space and not, or can you sort of do it yourself? Like if you want to change something, if you want to move a light fitting or whatever, or, what's involved with that? Like, is that something that is a little bit of something to be aware of before you go into the situation or the process, and get it into your spaces?
Yeah, I get asked this quite a bit. It does vary depending on the material. Clay is extremely forgiving. They kind of depend. If you've put colour in the plaster, that's more difficult. Is when you put water in, activates the lime, and you can get water marking when you try and blend it. But generally speaking, what I would say to people is if they've got a natural coloured plaster, it's generally fine to patch it. You can drill it. It also comes down to cost. So if you're paying for a very specialised finish, you're paying a master plasterer to do an incredible finish, that's going to be hard to patch because that's their workmanship, that's their hand on that plaster. If you've got just a very flat or you've done it yourself, that's easy to fix, no problem. But generally speaking, if you're doing it yourself, or you just want to make minor changes, or you've got a chip somewhere, it's not a big deal. We always recommend people keep a bag, just in a cupboard in the shed, just in case you need it in the future. But it does depend on the finish. But I just realised when we're talking about substrates and Tadelakt, for example, with our natural plasters, they absolutely can be applied straight over plasterboard. So even though they're traditional natural materials, our Ibiza gypsum and lime plaster, our clay plaster, and our French lime plasters, they can go directly over plasterboard. They can also go over cement sheeting with our bond. So they're still very suited to modern building design. It's just when we're talking about wet areas and areas that have to have a high function and using natural materials, that's when you want to consider the substrate.
Yeah. And I mean, just on that point about sort of making changes, I mean, that's why while I was creating this studio, I put so much thought and effort into, okay, exactly where do I want all my light fittings to go, my wall switches, my power points, because to just design it well so that I don't have to make changes. So that's what I say to my students is that you just have to, if you're going to go down this road, I think the best thing is to really think out your design very intentionally, very thoughtfully, and know where you're going to put all the things. Think about, how this space is going to function over time, so that you might just be changing the fitting of the light thing, but not necessarily moving the position of it. You might want to update a pendant, but you don't have to actually move, its point from the wall, or you can take off the, the metal component or whatever. But so that's something, because I get asked a lot about that with students and just people in general on Instagram. I'm sure you get asked a million questions too. But one other thing that I wanted to ask you about in relation to all of that, and something that I get asked a lot is, people ask, say, if they want to have a finish on a bench top in a kitchen or in a bathroom, that instead of sort of going for cement, like a sort of traditional kind of cement finish, what do you recommend for those kind of areas?
Micro cement. Absolutely. But it's really important. It's really important that your listeners know that micro cement is like saying plaster or render. There are lots of different kinds. And what we see is that because this is such a new thing, people, and we talk about access to information and transparency before, people are just kind of grabbing the term micro cement and then going out and asking for micro cement and ending up with something that is perhaps not what they wanted in terms of look and durability and the ability to maintain it. So, we're trying to educate people on the differences. There are cheaper versions. They might have lime in them. And they may be fine for shower walls, for example. But when you're doing countertops and you're doing basins and vanities, it's really important that you have something that is very, very strong and easy to clean. So sometimes and this is also why a professional really comes, we provide DIY, but professionals they get a very smooth finish. We call it closing the grain. That will make your finish, especially on countertops and vanities and floors, so much easier to clean because they know how to get that smooth surface. But I would say to clients to know what they're getting and ask for what they want, because if there are a lot of different micro cements and all vary greatly. So, yeah, we try and share information as much as we can to help people and send samples so people can see. We've got on our website, you can order finish samples so people can see and feel the finish that they're likely to get, so they know what to expect.
Yeah. Okay. And that, that's such a huge thing, isn't it? Just being able to see it,
Yes.
I think, you see it and you instantly know like the difference in what it looks like and feels like.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a team of people in our warehouse just doing samples because it takes so long, but it's really important. We want our end clients to know what they're getting.
Yeah, no. Well, now I want to ask, unless there are any other finishes you wanted to talk about, but I did want to ask about the health benefits of using these natural materials in your home. Certainly that was the appeal to me of using a natural finish in the space. And we really did notice the difference because when we use paints, even paints that purport to be low VOC, I still get a headache from them. And, I even just, I was talking to a friend the other day and they had done a home and had everything with natural materials and they had to move homes. And she said like her son was getting nosebleeds. I mean, that's from things like vinyl flooring, synthetic carpets, all of those things. I mean, the materials that are in our homes do have a huge impact on how we feel and our, and our health implications. So can you just talk a little bit to that?
Absolutely. So, the main thing, the first thing is natural plasters. It's important to check what's in the natural plasters. There's no acrylics or anything like that. But if it's a natural plaster, there are no VOCs, formaldehydes, additives. So that's full stop. That's a good thing to have on your wall. The second thing is around the material being breathing active and its ability to maintain or regulate relative humidity inside your home. So one thing that's been happening, we've been spending more and more time indoors, like the last 2 years, but since the early 40s, Western society been spending more and more time indoors. Our building materials have also changed a lot from your traditional timber and stone to things like sheeting. And then we also have buildings that are more sealed off, so more airtight. And so And then we're also painting, often is the normal choice, painting those walls inside our homes with a synthetic paint or varnish, and the outside of our homes with a synthetic paint as well. So it's kind of like wrapping your home in cling film in a way. But what that means, like when you use a natural plaster on the inside of your home, you're allowing the walls and the fabric of your building to breathe. That's one thing. And it's helping to stop moisture being trapped in the fabric of your building. And that will help to prevent building decay, but also any kind of mold or fungi growth in the walls itself. But also by having a quality natural plaster on your walls, it's going to help with moisture regulation. So there's an optimal humidity level for indoor air for most people, and between 40 and 50% relative humidity. When that gets too high, when you see condensation on windows from, a lot of moisture content, and that comes from things like washing, cooking, and breathing. That all is getting released into the air and inside your home, and it's sitting on the walls. When you've got a natural breathing plaster, that will help take that moisture in. When the moisture levels go high, it'll be like a sponge and take that moisture in. And then when the humidity level drops and the air gets drier, it releases it back. So it helps to maintain an optimal indoor air moisture level. And why that's important, first of all, it's going to inhibit mold and fungi. And that's something that is linked to asthma and allergies. And it's just something that, is becoming more and more important, the terrible floods around where you are. And here, and even up here, there's so much moisture and mold, and people are very concerned about that. So using natural plasters, lime is a natural mold inhibitor. And lime and clay, also they're working proactively to keep that moisture level low inside your home. They're also great for regulating temperature, and also clay is great for absorbing pollution and odor, diffusing light. So you'll know yourself when you see light come in, the way that it's soft and diffused throughout a room. And it's also, as you know, you get a sense of well-being from a living finish on your wall that it feels different. It feels cocooning. And when you look at it, it's not like a plastic painted wall. It's not flat. It's not inert. It is a living finish that is working with you and your family. So, for especially women that are eating organic food, filtering their water, buying organic bedding for their babies, this is something that I hope people consider more, what they're putting on their wall surfaces. And even if you can't have a straw bale or a cob or a rammed earth home, you can still put a beautiful natural breathing finish on your walls and help to enhance your air health inside.
It's funny that you talk about humidity, because right now a massive storm was breaking overhead. I don't know if you can hear the rain falling on the tin roof.
Yeah.
And you're talking about humidity levels. I mean, because we have had all this flooding and we're sort of getting a dehumidifier and moving it around the rooms. And at the moment, I mean, it's constantly, as soon as we turn it on, it's about 75%, if not more. And then we can kind of get it down to sort of 60 if we're lucky, and we keep it going and emptying the carton. But yeah, the humidity level is really, really high. And actually, I just want to ask, can you put these kind of finishes, I don't think it would work, but can you put it on timber? Like, as in, we have in our living room, I wouldn't want to hide the timber effect, like it's just like a shiplap kind of thing. But can you put them on timber or not? Because we've got so much timber in our home. Not many of the rooms actually have, sort of like a lining board as such.
Yes. So the challenge with timber, being a natural material, it will move. It moves with the temperature and it moves with water. So it expands and contracts and moves around. That's not ideal when it comes to coating. So you don't want movement like that. Also, the ability for the natural plasters to adhere to timber. You can do it with the bond, but it's just something that it's not an ideal substrate, put it that way, but there's always ways around it. And, that's something happy to discuss with you. But yeah, typically
no, I was just curious.
Yeah, is not.
Yeah. Okay, and so like I said, we've spoken about the health benefits, and I'm really curious as well about the courses that you run, because I saw that and I thought that's just fantastic. Can you talk a little bit more about the courses that you offer to people?
Yeah, of course. So I started the business originally as a DIY business, and it's gone in a very different direction now, where we're working on very large projects, thankfully, these days. But we still very much believe in that whole advocating people's choices and empowering people to, it shouldn't just be for people that can afford expensive finishes. They should be able to have healthy finishes in their homes. So I say I because it was me that was being filmed, but my husband escaped it. There's an online course, and it teaches people how to apply our Ibiza gypsum and lime plaster. It's, for DIY, we do recommend keeping the space fairly small, having realistic expectations around, an organic finish. You're not going to get a perfectly flat. You need a professional for some things. But if you want a really organic, beautiful, natural finish on a wall or in a bedroom, then you can purchase the plaster on our website, and you can also do our online course. And that's me as a total novice, teaching people how to, everything they need to prepare the plaster, to prepare the wall, to get it on the wall, finish it, basically everything they need to know. So it's something that I recommend because this is new to most people, and I find that it's a much more enjoyable experience when you can watch someone talk you through it.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. I mean, it sounds like the ideal thing if you're really wanting to learn more about the process, and maybe start with like a kid's room, or, like a small area that you want to just test out the idea. Maybe your office if you work from home and that's the kind of stuff that you're breathing in all the time. Yeah, no, it's great.
Totally. Yeah.
All right.
Or a studio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've covered most of the different finishes that are available, and I really appreciate you going through all of those with us and talking about the health benefits and how people can do it as well. I love the fact that you have got samples. I'm definitely going to be getting some of those for my next project, and because even just to getting samples can be really tricky, just that in itself. Now, I've got some questions that I wanted to ask you. These are just like a rapid fire, before we finish up, a rapid fire type questions, just to give a little bit more of an insight into you and your journey, and I just thought it would be fun to take a look at that as well. All right. So which 5 words best describe you? Which 5 come to mind straight away?
Oh my goodness. Creative, driven, introvert, dreamer, and I guess loving with my family.
What's the best life or career lesson you've learnt?
I think after all these years, it's been a hard one to learn, but just to follow my excitement. So when I was younger, you want the good job and the money and things like that, what you think is successful. What I've learned now is that if I see something, I meet somebody, I get excited, there's that rush of excitement, I have to follow it. So learning to use that as a guide.
Yeah, it's like that thing saying like follow your bliss or follow your joy, I guess.
Yeah, but it's for me it's very specific. It's like, okay, if I'm in a place, I'm talking to someone, I get that excitement, it means I'm where I need to be.
Very important. What's your proudest career achievement?
Well, I have to say, just being where we're at, this is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy industry. You're trying to do things differently, especially as a woman, different materials, trying to, go to market in a different way. It's been difficult, the first part, and I was on my own then. But now working with some of the largest architecture firms and design firms, and we have a team and some of the best applicators around the country. It's a real wow kind of thing to look back and go, wow, just proud overall that, we're at the point we're at with some great people around us.
What's been your best decision?
I think it's a bit of a strange one because we're technically we're a material supplier. We are in the business of supplying plasters, renders, micro cement, and that typically means selling a lot of products. But we made the decision to, while we'll always be boutique, we are boutique, we always will be boutique. We made the decision to stay small, and we made a decision to only work with a select few applicators for the first year and a bit. And that's changing, and that will continue to change. We will grow, are growing, but just keeping our community tight and making sure that everything we do is right and everything is beautiful. And if there were any problems, that we could go in and make it right. So I think that was, while it was really difficult and at the expense of finances, the decision to really keep it tight and small for the first, 18 months or so has been the right decision.
Interesting. Who inspires you?
Oh, well, I'm one of those people that I'm always listening to podcasts and I'm always reading books. And so I follow an Indian guru called Sadhguru. I listen to, motivational speakers and spiritual teachers, Tim Ferriss, business books, all that kind of thing. So I'm always trying to get whatever help I can get on a daily basis. Yeah, so no one person.
Yeah, no, I get that. What are you passionate about?
Well, a lot, obviously, but I think just generally making finishes like, the ones that we're making, an accessible choice for most people alongside paint and tiles.
What dream do you still want to fulfill?
Well, I would like to write a book like you have. That's like a big dream. That's massive. I've actually got your books just over there. A big dream is to make Mineral Fox accessible for most people. We're opening our first showroom next month. We're starting work on it here on the Sunshine Coast, and we plan to grow that out so that people can come, they can experience the finishes, they can ask questions, and just make it an inspirational and fun, exciting thing as opposed to a scary, confusing one.
I love that so much. I mean, I think that, people ask me so many questions, and I can imagine how many questions you get asked. So you can hopefully redirect them to this podcast and say, look, I'm just laying it out to Natalie. Yes. This is answering. Just listen to this episode. You'll get your questions answered. But yeah, I think that's wonderful. So what are you reading at the moment? So it sounds like you probably have a lot of books on your bedside table. What are you reading at the moment? Yes.
Well, there's one that I think you'll like, actually. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called A Modern Way to Live. It's by a UK author called Matt Gibbard. And it's a book, it's a very beautiful book, first and foremost, but he talks about different design principles that I guess they're more traditional but have been lost a bit in modern buildings. So things like light, nature, what else is there? Materiality, and just when you spoke about light switches before, it one of the things I got out of the book, usually with things like light switches and doorknobs and things like that, they get overlooked. But he's talking about you should spend money where you're going to be touching things the most? What are you going to come into contact with? And things like light switches, you're touching them all the time. Do you really want plastic? And I notice you've got metal ones, and door handles, same thing, beautiful brass or iron door handles. So that really has been an eye-opener for me, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I always say that invest, like people often go cheap with hardware, and I always think actually invest in that. That's the stuff that you're touching and using every single day. Like that's, you can really feel the quality in it. And I always think there's a big difference, between the sort of the cheaper versions and the ones that actually, stand the test of time. But I haven't heard of that book, so I definitely will look it up. What are you listening to?
Yes, I'll send it to you. Old school hip hop and podcasts. Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah. So you mentioned Tim Ferriss. Are there any others that are some of your favorites?
Yes, a bit of a mix. So Sadhguru, so he's an Indian guru that just does very short spiritual advice every day. He has a huge following. And then
how do you spell his name?
Oh, you're testing me now. S-A-H-D Sadhguru. It means the people's guru in Hindi. But he'll be easy to find.
We'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other ones?
I highly recommend. Oh gosh, my husband laughs at me. Tony Robbins, Eckhart Tolle, the usual suspects, people that, like Tim Ferriss, obviously, and people that I try and, sometimes I switch around, Reid Hoffman, just trying to get a little bit of, sometimes I'm so into what I'm doing, and as a small business owner, as you know, you've got to do so much, and it's hard to make space for, more conscious thinking about where you're going and the direction. So I try and take time for that every day.
Yeah, no, me too. And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say just you are enough, and to follow your excitement.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Karmin. And can you just share one last time how people can find you on all the usual channels? Can you just share that before we wrap up?
Yes, absolutely. On Instagram, it's mineral_fox, and so our website is mineralfox.com.au. And they're the main ones. So if anyone would like any help, you can always email us as well, and that's on the website.
Great. Well, once again, thank you so much. It's just been such a sort of mind-expanding experience, and I hope that other people enjoy it as well and have got a lot of value from this. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge. I know that going through the processes that you have gone through, I mean, it's a big journey, and to share so freely and openly when so many people don't, and it can be so hard to get answers. I just think that so much, abundance will come your way in return. Like, I just think that, I mean, that's kind of what happened when I started doing my courses, was just kind of going, I'm just going to put it out there, and what happens. And, I think some people can really hold all this information tight to them, and I don't think it ultimately ends up serving them. So thank you so much for being so free and open and generous with your time and your knowledge and your experience. And I can't wait to try out your products in my next project. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.